Today's topic is one of these things that is near and dear to the heart of our industry. There are so many people in the industry who have made the transition from military service to the civilian sector, and it's just a really, really cool thing that so many people want to share their knowledge and help new people make that transition. Our speakers today, I'll go through that. Actually, I'm going to start real first. We've got to make a shout out. Congratulations to NASA and JPL. We actually have a helicopter on Mars now. I mean, I can't think of anything that's really cooler. No, it doesn't look like, it looks more like a drone, but if they're going to call it a helicopter, we're going to embrace it. And I can't wait to see that thing, see the video from it, and see the images from Perseverance of it flying through the Martian atmosphere. To get back on topic, our panelists today include Jim Viola, the president and CEO of HAI, Greg Brown, who is the director of education for HAI and is the Mil2Civ coordinator for HAI. I believe he'll hopefully give an email address later if you have questions. We have Stacy Sheard, who is a corporate helicopter captain for Exec Jet Management and Fanatics, and is also currently the chair of the HAI Board of Directors. We have Heidi McBride, who is a VFR captain for ERA Bristow in the Gulf. We have Mark Stanley, a longtime rotorcraft industry professional and a veteran, I believe, of the U.S. Army. I hope I got that right, Mark. We have Joe Belsha, who is chief pilot for both fixed wing and rotary wing operations with Apollo MedFlight. We have David Mccall, who is a utility helicopter pilot. This is an interactive webinar. We do encourage you to ask questions. The best way to do that is to use the question module in your control panel on the side of your screen. It will open up a text box. You can type your question in and send it to us. We will see it. We will try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation before we have to finally cut things short. This presentation is being recorded. If you do miss something, we encourage you to go back and look at the webinar again. We also encourage you to share the video link. We'll be trying to share the video link with you either tomorrow or Monday at the latest. All of our webinar videos for past webinars are on our website at rotor.org/webinars. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jim Viola, the president and CEO of HAI, to come in and make his opening remarks.
All right, great. Thanks, Dan. And we certainly want to get started. You know, today's topic is something I understand well. I began my flying career in the military and was always looking forward to flying outside the military. So listening today to the prep as the panel was prepping for today, it's amazing all the different backgrounds that our 5 panelists have, and they're going to share that experience with you today. My military to civilian transition went pretty good because I prepared for it early. And so that's the one thing I'll leave with you, is that you're never too early to start getting ready for your next career or what you're going to do next. So ask some good questions today and make sure you start preparing on day one. If you haven't prepared anything yet, start tomorrow after you get some good advice from our panelists today. At HAI, we have a number of military veterans on staff, as well as you heard Stacy on the board of directors as well. So we have firsthand knowledge about the amount of transition information from various sources, and we know that it can seem overwhelming. So hopefully that'll get pared down for you today with some solid information, which is the goal of this program. Today's panelists have all gone through that same situation that are facing most of you out there, and that's probably why you're here today. So the questions and the thoughts that you're experiencing, you know, what do I need to do before I leave? Who is hiring? What do I need to do to make myself a successful candidate? What mission sector? I mean, the mission sectors in the helicopter community are, you know, limitless. So I look forward to hearing what the panelists share with you. I look forward to you participating today. And, you know, just want to let you know that HAI supports the VTOL industry and the helicopter industry as you transition from a military career or just a military beginning to civilian. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and bring on Greg Brown. He is, as introduced, our Mil2Civ program coordinator, and he's also the HAI Director of Education. And you will be seeing more of him in the next few months as we bring some of the courses that normally were held at Heli Expo will now be coming on these webinars on Thursday. So Greg, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And as Jim mentioned, the transition period can be somewhat daunting if you're not prepared for it. I went through that myself, and again, I was pretty much prepared and ready for the transition. We have an excellent group of panelists today from all diverse backgrounds that will kind of help you in that area. So I'm going to start the introduction with Stacy Sheard. She's the chair of our board of directors here at HAI, and have Stacy come on and give a brief introduction.
Thanks, Greg. My name is Stacy Sheard. As previously said, I'm the chair on the board of directors for Helicopter Association International. I started my career in the Army. I flew Hueys and Blackhawks, and then transitioned out of the military without much knowledge at all of what I was doing, and worked my way into a tour position in the Grand Canyon in Las Vegas. Then became an air ambulance pilot, news pilot, a bit of movie work, and then eventually I became a Sikorsky test pilot. And these days I'm flying corporate in the Northeast in Philadelphia. So that's pretty much where I am. Years ago, Mark Stanley and I, who's also going to be on the webinar, started a military to civilian transition workshop, which will bring a bit of that to you today in this webinar. But that pretty much sums me up, and I'll go ahead and let the next person introduce.
Thanks, Stacey, appreciate it. The next person I want to introduce, as Stacey mentioned, Mark Stanley. Mark was instrumental in getting the program Mil2Civ started at HAI. So Mark, again, has a lot of experience and be willing to share that with you. So Mark, please introduce yourself.
My name is Mark Stanley. I'm a 26-year veteran in the U.S. Army. I did 9 years as a Cobra, Black Hawk, and Little Bird crew chief. Then figured out after, the guy sitting up front didn't work as hard as I did, so I became a warrant officer. Then flew Black Hawks for the next 17 years. My last couple of years in service, I was stationed in D.C., and my commander asked me once after I went to my first Heli Expo, what did I learn? Put a OPD together, and I didn't have a clue. So the first person I met walking in the door at Heli Expo was Stacy Sheard. So she was my first call, and we had created the skeleton of what has now become Mil2Civ. And then my transition out of the service was pretty easy because I'd done all the networking and stuff, and pretty much walked right into a corporate position flying for an insurance company in the Northeast. And then for family reasons, I left that job and then came out here to Texas just in time for COVID. So, the mark has been a little off, so I'm enjoying retirement right now, but we'll probably get back out there this summer. So look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Mark. Next person I want to introduce is Heidi McBride. Heidi came from the Coast Guard, lots of different experience. She started out in the maintenance area, and now she's flying. So I'll let Heidi kind of tell you that story. So Heidi, welcome.
Thank you very much, Greg. As Greg mentioned, my name is Heidi McBride, and I did start out in the Coast Guard as a crew chief on Jayhawks and an avionics technician. I did that for 8 years, and when I transitioned from the Coast Guard into the civilian sector, I also did not have a plan. However, I stumbled into helicopter flight school, ended up being a great fit for me, and I used my military mechanic and avionics background to get my certification as an airframe and power plant license. So we have some mechanics that are watching today. Please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, and feel free to ask some questions after the presentation about how to make that transition from military to mechanic to civilian mechanic. Your skills are highly valued and desirable. While I was going to flight school, I did work as an avionics technician and mechanic for my flight school. When I finished my flight training, I built my flight time by flying tours in Florida. I worked as both a pilot and a mechanic for my tour operators in Florida. And then I finally got accepted for a flying position in the Gulf of Mexico, strictly as a pilot. I flew for Bristow in the Gulf of Mexico, and then shortly with ERA purchasing Bristow, they had a furlough, and thankfully I got hired right away by ERA. So I currently fly an AW119 in the Gulf of Mexico for ERA helicopters.
Thanks, Heidi. Appreciate that. Next person I want to introduce is Dave Mccall. Dave is an interesting background. He flies a lot of long line, has a lot of experience in that area. So I'll let Dave introduce himself and talk a little bit about that. Dave, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, my name is David Mccall, and I'm a utility pilot. I mostly fly the MD 500 or the 530s, flying around power lines, working on power lines, doing lots of external loads. I was never a pilot in the military. When I got out of the military, I wanted to go to flight school, but it was pretty expensive, so I decided to take a contracting job for 1 year, which would pay for flight school. 1 year turned into 5 years, and then I eventually got to flight school, got my CFI, and then my first job was actually doing a pipeline patrol in a piston aircraft. That company transitioned me into some of their turbine aircraft, the 206, the 500, starting doing power line patrols, and then from there it was almost like a natural progression after a year working for that company to move on to some of the other companies that do the power line work as far as the external loads and working on live wires. So any questions, I'll be happy to help. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. And last but not least, but definitely not least, is Mr. Joe Belsha. Joe, again, tremendous experience flying both in the fixed and rotor wing world, and he can tell you about some of the things that he's doing in the area he's flying in. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. First, thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service to our country. Greatly appreciate what you've done, and the step that you're about to take is pretty monumental. So everybody here on this panel and within the Mil2Civ program is here to help and support you. I started my career at 17 years old as a true high school to flight school product of the Warrant Officer Flight Training Program, the U.S. Army. Spent 11 years as an Apache pilot, standardization instructor pilot, instrument examiner, master gunner. Always actually thought that I was going to retire, but took kind of a pivot with my wife, my family. We made the decision to transition a little earlier than we had planned. Left after 11 years of service, and my transition story is actually, I got very lucky. I had a friend that helped me through the transition, had gone through it before me. Had no idea what the civilian world was about. Everybody thinks that they know. They think they'll do their 6 years and get out, and it's a lot different than we all think. Didn't find out about Mil2Civ until a mutual friend of ours introduced me to Stacy Sheard. Found out about Mil2Civ and heli success, and knew immediately that I wanted to pay back the help that was given to me from that friend during my transition. So definitely have a passion for helping veterans figure it out and get situated in the civilian world. Segued directly to air ambulance, had a company that took a chance on me, and made great contacts there over 6 years at a major air medical company, flying Bell 407s and later EC-135s. Ended up as a program safety director for a hospital program and a base lead, and then was selected by my current operator to be the chief pilot for fixed wing and rotor wing operations. Currently a single pilot IFR captain, ATP, CFII, and check airman all checks for Bell 407 and EC-135. Looking forward to your questions on the air ambulance industry and any way I can help you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. And if I could have all the panelists bring up the cameras, that'd be great. Also, for the attendees out there, we will have the information for all the panelists you can download on the information block there in the section where you can see ask for questions. So take a look there and have all the panelists, or you can contact me at HAI. I'll make sure I'll get their information to you. With the transition phase, a lot of folks are looking at it and wondering, where do you begin? How do you start? One of the first questions we got here, and I probably direct this to Stacy to start out, is when do you start the transition process when you're in? When do you get that process started?
As early as possible. The advice that all of us are going to give is the key to all of this is your networking. The connections that you're going to make in the industry are vital to your career. Don't do this alone. Reach out. If you see someone out there on LinkedIn that has a job at a company you'd love to work for, reach out to that person, message them, tell them that's what you want to do, and ask them, what are the best ways to do it? And can I come for a visit? Anything. Can you take a look at my resume? Anything to get the conversation started and start networking. I normally will tell people you want to start 3 years before you're ready to leave the military. But I recently heard a good friend of mine said they started 6 years prior to getting out. And all of the people I know that have started networking early and just connecting with people, even online in these days, it works out so much better for them when they have help and they have multiple mentors to guide them rather than going it alone. So networking as early as you can. If you haven't started, start now. Reach out, look at all these names, take a screenshot picture of all of these names and look them up on LinkedIn and connect and ask for help, whatever your needs are. We're always out here.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Maybe Stacy, what would be some great websites other than just LinkedIn that could also help with the networking process and the seminars? Like what kind of seminars would I go to start that networking process?
Well, the ones we're all at, I see these people again and again, and a couple of places that we normally go when everything's open is the Heli Expo. Of course, that's the biggest event of the year is HAI Heli Expo. It's once a year, and it'll be next year in Dallas about this time. The military to civilian transition workshop will be there, and it will be live with all of the mentors, 50 or more mentors there to help in person. Some other places you can go are Heli Success, which is a great career development seminar put on by Rotorcraft Pros Lynn Burks. It's a wonderful outreach program, and they cater to a lot of military people. So those are the two live places you can go. But if you make a connection online and you're in the neighborhood of someone who's doing a job similar to something you'd like to do, I would see if you can meet up with them, go visit their hangar, see what it's like, meet everybody that's working there. Because most of us will tell you that we get a lot of resumes every day for jobs, but it makes a huge difference when we know who you are and we've met you and we can put a face to a piece of paper. So reach out to people, and you do have to make that personal contact if at all possible.
Thanks, Stacey. Appreciate that. The other question comes up, as you mentioned, LinkedIn, and I think, Mark, I heard you talk about it one time, is your profile picture and what you have in LinkedIn. Can you address a little bit more on that and what they should put in as they start looking for and try to connect the networking side using LinkedIn?
Well, for myself, originally I had put my my DA photo was my LinkedIn photo, and then someone had brought up to me that that's great, but aren't you trying to be a civilian pilot? Why do you have a picture of a military photo? And it made a world of sense to me that you already proved you're in the military. That's great, but if you're trying to be a civilian, you need to have some sort of civilian photo in there, and it doesn't have to be a professional photo or anything. Usually at our at the either Heli Success or the Mil2Civ at Heli Expo, we just tell people, you're dressed up nice now, you got a nice shirt on, stand up against the wall, hand your phone to somebody and get a picture of you. Or, on Sunday, you got your Sunday best on, or you take the wife out for a nice date or something like that, or your spouse, sorry. Then whoever you are, this quick picture, so you can see what you look like as a civilian and just put that up. That's all you need for a photo, but it just shows that you're not holding on to that military life, and it's not your identity, and it's not what you are now. You're looking to be a civilian, a professional civilian, and this is what a professional civilian looks like. That's kind of my opinion. There's also a lot of really bad photos out there, so let's take a look at what we got.
Yeah, it's important too that what you write on your LinkedIn page or Facebook page, because a lot of employers now, when they look you up, and they look at all that information that you have out there, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, whatever, and it always goes back to make sure what you write is acceptable, that your mom would say that's acceptable. The best way to put it. If your mom won't say that's acceptable, then you really need to think about that. So thanks to that.
There's
The next question to come up. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
just real quick. There's something else I always tell people in the class is to I give them homework. Basically, there's a gentleman named Sultan Camp, C-A-M-P, who did an article said, congratulations on your retirement. Here's 9 reasons why I won't hire you. It's an amazing article. I suggest everybody read it. He really gets down there in the weeds, and I can't recommend that article enough. Even if you're here for 5 seconds and something else happens, do that homework. It'll sum up pretty much everything we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you.
Just in the heart of profile pictures and things like that, and you mentioned, Greg, which is truly the case, that employers will look at your LinkedIn. They will also look at your Facebook. So keep that in mind. If you have something that's unprofessional or that may not necessarily represent you very well for getting a job in the civilian sector, you might want to clean up your Facebook before you start sending those applications and those resumes, because I promise you they will look you up.
Absolutely, absolutely. In this day and age, they will. A few questions that come in talk about a little bit on the logbook side, and how do you make the transition from military flight time to civilian flight time? And go to you, Heidi, and see, can you kind of talk a little bit more about that transition and how you get those flight times?
Absolutely, and I'm definitely going to have Stacy kind of weigh in a little bit heavier on this because she has more experience with that military flight time for that transition. But it's very important to realize that the way the FAA logs flight time as PIC time and flight time that you can count as aircraft flight time is different than the way the military counts it for you. So Stacy, if you want to kind of specify on the details of how would our transitioning members get the flight time they deserve as far as the FAA defines it versus the way the military is going to hand them their sheet of paper and say, oh, congratulations, here's your list of flight hours.
Yeah, you know, I've written an article on this. Flight time is really important. First of all, if you're not keeping a logbook, start now. And a technique that a lot of people tend to start out with is start logging it today and then log backwards. Take all of the flights to the best of your ability and get the military printout, and to the best of your ability, log every flight you've had. And take a look at job advertisements, and you're going to see what flight time is important to employers. Things like night unaided is important, offshore, over water is important. You know, you want to track what the job advertisements are asking for. So when you're logging your time, track all of these things. If you have external loads, long line, anything that mountainous time, there are a number of items out there that the military is not going to capture for you. What the military tracks for you is not a logbook in accordance with if you're reading the FARs. Most military pilots get that little certificate that's from the FAA that says that you're a pilot, so you can log time in accordance with the FARs. So I did write an article about it. There's no specific technique. However, you can certainly reach out to any of us to see how we're doing it, but you do want to start looking at those. You've probably, if you think you have a certain number of hours, I'll bet you, if you count it the way the military counts it, you've probably got a lot more hours than you actually think you do. More PIC and more total time. So if you track it properly, whoop, we're loud, then you're going to have a bit more than you think you do.
Sorry, Mark.
Let me just add that the FAA approves if you can't go back on your 759 to get those. Can you hear me, or is that the broken up?
Maybe some of us should mute.
All right. That if you can't go back on your hours, because you know the 759 or the computer system can only go back like the year or something like that on your closeout. Maybe go back farther. I can't remember. But if you just make a line entry that is transferred from your 759 in the remarks, that's what I did. I mean, you can do it for all the aircraft, but I broke it down by you know, Alpha Lima Black Hawk, Mike Mile Black Hawk, you know, TH-67, 58, all that stuff. each line and transferred all that over in one time, and then added in the civilian stuff because, you know, high altitude or whatever it is. But make sure you're getting in the far aim to see exactly what entails mountain time or what entails the PIC time. So.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thanks. And just to echo a little bit and expound on what Stacy and Mark and Heidi have talked about, first off, anytime anybody comes to me for mentorship on Logbook, I immediately send them to Stacy's article. Nobody's really put it all in one place like Stacy has. So without getting too deep into the weeds, highly recommend you follow Stacy on LinkedIn and look at all those articles that she's written in the past. What I encourage guys that come to me and are asking specific to logbooks, understand that the regulation under 14 CFR 61.51 is kind of your gospel. So go in and make yourself very familiar with it. And what you'll find is there's no one right or standardized way to do a logbook format. But if you go to an employer and you have the ability to intelligently articulate your flight time in accordance with that regulation, then that'll cover you. And I did the same thing Mark did. I made the single line entries and actually took 3 full days with my military logbook that I'd done day by day and translated it all to 6151. It was time very well spent. So definitely encourage everyone to spend the time and go scrub your logbooks.
I just figured since we're on the topic of flight time, now would be a really great time to kind of ask our presenters, what kind of flight hours are your industries looking for? Where we've got EMS being represented, we've got utility, power line, and corporate, and the Gulf of Mexico. What sort of flight hours are you looking for on a resume, and how should they verbalize that kind of flight time on their resume to match that job description? I don't know if Joe, you want to go ahead and start in the EMS world, what you would like to see, how they would name that flight time, and what categories you're specifically looking for, and how in the military time that might transfer over.
Sure. Thanks, Heidi. I appreciate it. So air ambulance almost universally is governed by what we call the Commission on Accreditation of Medical Transport Systems, or CAMS. And this accreditation body kind of dictates best practices for the air ambulance industry with regard to everything that we do. One of those things is flight time. So you'll find that the highest CAMS accredited organizations are looking for a minimum of 2,000 hours of flight time. And if you're a rotorcraft pilot, 1,200 hours of those must be in rotorcraft. On top of that, we're looking for about 1,000 PIC, and that's 6151 PIC. And then you need 100 hours of night time, or 50 hours of unaided nighttime with 100 hours of aided nighttime. And this is really critical for my guys out there that are flying EFIS, or not just NVGs, but my Apache guys out there, etc. Don't forget that nobody out here knows what a TADS PINVIS is. So when you're flying FLIR, consolidate that with your NVG time as night vision device flight time, because it's all applicable to that aided flying hour requirement. On top of that, we're also looking for single pilot IFR jobs, anywhere between 100 and 200 hours of instrument flight time, generally 50 hours of actual weather flight time. So be aware that even though you may have logged quite a bit of instrument time, for example, in the simulator for the instrument examiner's course, for example, it's the single pilot IFR jobs are very often tailored toward actual weather flight time. And that's pretty much what you're looking at for air ambulance. 1,500 is your golden hour level where you'll start to open some doors for air ambulance, but 2,000 hours should really be your goal.
So Joe, on top of that, just and I've got a couple of questions on this. What is the magic number for recency of flight time? A lot of our attendees would have 2,500, 3,000 hours, but it's been about 3 years since they've been inside the aircraft. So in looking at them, what would be the recency of experience be required? That's something you can wrap around.
Thank you, Greg. That's a great question as well. And I'll tell you, it depends. The big providers out there, and I came from one of the big conglomerate medical providers, for them, recency is a must. And I'm going to try not to use company names here, but generally speaking, the big names that come to mind when you think about air medical, more and more of these companies are moving away from long distance commuters. For fatigue management purposes, they're moving away from 14-14 schedules and more towards 7 on, 7 off schedules. And on top of that, we're also looking for recency, as you allude to. So if you don't have actual applicable recency per the CFR, you're probably not going to be a competitive candidate for the big providers. Everybody else is case by case. And my company, for example, when I work in concert with my HR department, I look at everybody case by case as a whole product individual. So if I have, for example, my naval aviators out there that have just come off from your staff tour, and you haven't flown in 3, 4, 5 years because you're a department head on shore duty or whatever it is, you probably won't be highly competitive at some of these larger organizations. But if you come to me with recency, maybe you didn't fly in 3 years regularly, but you've been instructing once a week or so, not necessarily highly applicable recency, but it helps. The biggest thing that I tell guys, if you're coming, and gals, if you're coming into this industry and you have that break in recency, more and more companies are getting savvy to the, well, I jumped into Robbie and I took the safety course, and other than that, I haven't flown in 3 years. That's not really cutting it anymore. But for me and a couple of the other companies, what I highly recommend to you is find a good airline transport pilot program. If you do not already have that certificate, go through that training. And generally, like for me, for example, you got a lapse of 3, 4, 5 years, but you got an ATP, I'm going to pick you up.
Great info. Go ahead, Heidi.
Dave, so let's say you're coming from the Army, you're a gunship pilot, maybe you got some Black Hawk time with some search and rescue, long line time. How would they get into a position like you're doing now, flying an MD-500, doing the power line work, doing the utility work?
I think this is maybe one of the harder transitions for the military guys to get into power lines. The easy one, or the easier ones, I believe, are EMS and Gulf of Mexico, but there's a couple of routes. Networking is a great thing. I'm actually fighting tooth and nail to try and help an Apache guy out, and he has got no long line time, but he's a good guy. So you're networking, but Apache probably that's your hardest route into utility. But if you've got maybe Black Hawk time, your S70 time, Black Hawks are getting used a ton in the utility industry. A lot of companies that operate Black Hawks also operate 500s, and they'll do fires and also power line work. So that's a possible route in for you. You get you take your Black Hawk time, you take that, and you get a job as an SIC for a season, and then you can transition into the other airframes. Another thing you may want to look at is I want to have it down here. If you can't go directly into the utility, sorry about this. If you can't go directly into the utility, but that's your end goal, and you're going to take a job in the Gulf of Mexico or in EMS, possibly think of the airframe that you're going to fly at these companies. S76 is not used in utility. AW119 is not used in utility. Look at getting into a 407 or an A-Star, because a lot of companies will use them in utility, and it's a good transition for you.
Would you say that if, for example, you would really like the MD-500 doing the utility power line work, but you've got the Black Hawk long time experience, a company maybe like PJ Helicopters, or maybe doing firefighting in Australia with a Black Hawk, would that kind of flight time and experience get you more recognized for a utility company that would primarily operate 500s, if that's your goal?
Definitely. If you get a job with one of these companies that have got multiple aircraft and you want in the 500, the cost of operating the 500 versus the cost of operating a Black Hawk, if you're in the hangar and just say, hey, I'd like to go for a ride in the 500, there's a good chance they're going to take you up. So do your homework, find out what companies are there, and do the type of work you want. While we're on that, I'll get into this now if you want. A good resource to find out what companies are doing utility. All utility companies have what's called a Part 133 certificate. They need a certificate from the FAA to operate external loads. A good way to find all these companies is go to the HAI website. Go to rotor.org. If you want to write this down, go to rotor.org and then go to the tools and then go to the membership directory. And there is a list of all your potential employers there. And if you look them up by certificate they operate, Part 133, that will get you a list of every member of HAI that operates with a Part 133 certificate, and it will be very extensive. You can also search by type of aircraft.
So another question real quick is, what advice would you give to military members? They have a lot of experience doing external doing other flights, but don't know how to translate that into, does the external operations mean you can do long line? Does flying a medevac in the military mean you can now just automatically jump in and fly for one of the big medevac companies? What's the transition or the translation in that aspect?
I'll take it for the external load part. If you are flying, if you're in the Navy or the Coast Guard, or you're flying the Lakotas and you're doing any hoist work is considered Class D, a Class D external load. Get out your FAR aim, look up Part 133. If you're just slinging a load underneath a CH-47 or a Black Hawk, like taking in cargo, that would be considered a Class B load. So you can and you can log that time. So if you're flying cargo from Kandahar out to a FOB and it takes you an hour and a half to get there, that's you got 1.5 of Class B external load that you can use.
To answer that from the air medical side, Greg, actually that's really interesting, but my medevac guys that come from the military are always probably the most excited about getting into air medical. And quite honestly, guys, air medical is so different from military medevac that most of the medevac pilots coming out are set up for failure. Mostly the scout and attack guys are the best set up to come into air ambulance because you're used to freak call sign grid and go. And it's very easy, very fluid, very dynamic kind of roll with it. Medevac is not air ambulance. It's completely different. The dynamics of the crews, the politics of the programs, it's a great business, but they don't equate. So if it's a passion of yours to care for people, to care for patients, and to have come from that world, just understand that the dynamic is going to be very different on the civilian EMS side.
Yeah, Heidi, go ahead.
We haven't really talked about, so say I've been flying a Black Hawk but I'd really like to get into the corporate world. Maybe my family's from the Northeast. Stacy and Mark, you guys are in that world. How would I transition from a twin engine helicopter into a twin engine VIP corporate company? And would I need to take some steps with some other companies to sort of get into that position in the Northeast?
Go ahead, Mark.
Stacy already answered that question. Network. Network. It's totally who you know. Because if you don't have the hours and you go out and you fly tours in New York City, and that's how the corporate folks get to know those people. The Eastern Regional Helicopter Conference has an annual get together in September. Obviously canceled this past September. Hopefully get together. It's a good time, a bunch of pilots getting together, but that's the networking place to get your name out there. But it's networking, or you get a job where you're going to see people's faces all the time up there in the Northeast, and they get to know you, and they get find out how well you're flying and all that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of places like there's the tours, there's EMS, and there's some contract, or not contract, but I'm like missing the words popping from my head. Stacy will have it though.
Yeah, the reason why. Oh, do you want to go ahead, Joe? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just, to kind of segue from what Mark was saying, I also just, for everybody out there, don't discount the professional development organizations and organized networks. HAI is a great one to associate with. The dues go a long way, and the events are critical to meeting people in the industry, learning who's working out there, who's who, and what's what. There are a lot of organizations that you can align with or associate with. Whirly Girls is a great one that I'm sure Stacy and Heidi are both associated with, and a couple of other people that work Mil2Civ. The Combat Helicopter Pilots Association, and there are several others out there, the Association of Air Medical Services. Look at the industries that you're interested in and what professional organizations are associated with them. And that's a great place to start networking.
Yeah, that's an excellent tip. So much is done. I mean, if you're ever looking for a reason to go to something like Heli Expo or any of these conferences, the professional education courses that you can take there are fabulous. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of rub elbows with people and see what they do for a living. Just ask them about what they do. I mean, we're all into the helicopter industry and we all love helicopters. So it's what we have in common. It's very easy to talk to each other. Yeah. And a couple of reasons why I think certain sectors, there's probably about 29 sectors of the helicopter industry right now, and it's growing with all the vertical aircraft that are coming out. Some of the sectors are smaller than others. So if you're interested in firefighting, say, or corporate, or some of the sectors that are a little bit smaller and maybe more tight-knit than others, what you want to do is you want to reach out. And you know, these days, we've said it before, reaching out online is a great way, but reach out. And this goes for maintenance as well. Actually, if you're a maintainer, connecting is key because you reaching out and going the extra mile is going to make all the difference. And on the pilot side, it's the same thing. We fly in the corporate industry in the Northeast. It's a small community and we all tend to know each other. We're sitting in a cockpit together for, you know, you could be on duty for 14 hours and you're going to have to get along with that person that's sitting next to you. So you want to know them, you want to like them, and that is the way you get hired. So it tends to keep some of the communities more tight knit, but it's not that they're keeping people out. It just takes that extra effort to reach out and introduce yourself and take the extra effort to maybe stop by the hangar and make a visit. So it all comes back to the same thing, is the network that you build will increase your level of success when you're ready to transition. And by networking, you're going to find out that there are so many more jobs available than you can see online. So just word of mouth is the biggest way to find a job. I mean, we know who's hiring well before it's ever advertised online. So these are what your connections are going to get you. And plus, once you get a mentor, you have a free person that can critique your resume for you and give you guidance, the guidance that you might need, and make that connection. You know, I think, Heidi, you have a great story about being furloughed and having a job, losing a job on Friday and having a job on Monday. Tell that story. I mean, it's all about your network.
Absolutely. Stacey's right. Networking is huge. And I think sometimes like the definition of networking kind of gets lost as like being an interesting terminology. Networking is just introducing yourself to other members of this industry. We all have one thing in common. Helicopters and aviation is our passion, or else we wouldn't be here. So you have something to talk about. Even if you have a struggle trying to meet people, just introduce yourself to somebody and ask them, how did you get your start in this industry? It's a great conversation starter. So my talk, like Stacy mentioned, I was at Bristow for 10 months. There's a little bit of a downturn. Bristow filed for Chapter 31 bankruptcy or whatever it is, and ERA purchased Bristow. Well, Bristow was a union, so I was hired. I was only there for about 10 months. I loved it. Great company, great helicopters, great experience, got a lot of flight time, a great airframe. But because I was hired late and I was new, I was one of the first people to be furloughed, myself along with other 28 pilots, and then additionally later about 80 pilots were furloughed. Whenever I interviewed with Bristow initially for my first time getting the job, I had an additional interview opportunity with ERA at the same time, like 2 days later. So I accepted both interviews. I accepted the job at Bristow because that's where I thought I would fit best at. But I still went to my interview with ERA 2 days later. Both companies knew I was interviewing at both companies, and I made every effort to make a positive impact on both companies and to interview well. And both ERA and Bristow wanted me, which was great. You know, first time in my little baby pilot career, I have competition. So it's very important to make a positive influence and impact on the people you're interviewing with. And you never know what doors might close. So Bristow was my #1 choice. ERA was my #2, but a very close #2. And ERA, after my interview, said, look, Heidi, we really like you. You're a tiny bit short on the flight hours, but please contact us for any reason. If you ever want to leave Bristow or they furlough you or whatever, please let us know. Your resume's at the top of the pile. Well, it turns out when Bristow started downsizing, I emailed the chief pilot, said it looks like we might be downsizing and there's talk of furloughs. Do you have any positions available? And you know, in my email, I reminded him, okay, this is me. This is what my interview was like. He said, absolutely, we remember you. We have a position in New Orleans. I'll put you in contact with the lead pilot. And this conversation was on a Thursday. I was furloughed on a Friday, and on Monday afternoon, I had a job offer letter to be signed in my mailbox before noon. So it's very important to, like, you have to represent yourself professionally, and just because you have a job that you think you want doesn't mean you should close a door on another potential opportunity.
Great insights on that. Great information there. And again, this just for the folks out there, you know, how important it is to present yourself professionally and make sure you don't just burn any bridges because you think, oh, I got the job that I want, so I won't bother with the other company. You always want to follow up and be respectful of the other person's time. Yes, Joe.
And yes, absolutely, Greg. And to kind of, I'll try to keep this short, but in a completely different industry, air medical. You know, you can get caught up very easily as a line pilot in the everyday politics, the shop talk, the water cooler talk. And it's very important to maintain that professionalism and your just your general overall interaction with everybody. When I was with the other provider that I was with, I spent over 6 years at that place, and I ended up doing a lot of regional education and operating as a safety director for the flight program. I ended up getting a job offer, and a subsequent, now here I am working as the chief pilot of a direct competitor in the same town where I was working. And it was pretty well known that in the air medical industry, everybody's just sort of slashing and jabbing each other, bad mouthing each other. And I always wanted to remain above the fray, be professional, and just talk about the positives of my company. And it made an impression on this competitor of mine in my town. And it ended up working very well for me through the interview process. It was a known quantity in this region, and they selected me for the chief pilot job. So always very important to keep your bearing and just kind of always take the high road.
One question that popped up here from one of our listeners is, they applied for a position, they felt that they were extremely qualified with hours and experience, but they have not heard anything back for a few weeks, or things over a month now, I think. What advice would you give them, because they think, I really want this job, but they're not calling me back? I'll let you go, Mark.
So one thing you'll learn is, you know, the military, we're used to hurry up and wait. The civilians have that down to an art. You're on their timeline. You know, they might need a position right now, but then you got to get through the system, and it takes a couple of weeks. So you got to give it time. And then, you know, if it's been 2 weeks, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with reaching out and say, hey, I'm still interested in position. Just want to see, you know, where my application fits in and stuff like that. Don't be pushy, but, you know, if you haven't heard anything in 2 weeks, just reach out. I mean, you might get the standard line, but you're showing that there's an interest. Now let the experts here answer these questions.
Go, Joe.
Thanks, Stacy. Just so that everybody knows, and I'll just speak to the air medical portion of recruitment. I started working with that larger provider probably 5 years ago, assisting recruiting, just because I worked all over the country with the company. And I've seen through the big providers, and now it's trickling down to the smaller certificates, more and more Your recruiting staff at these companies is not involving the chief pilot, is not involving a pilot at all. A lot of the bigger companies are outsourcing to talent management agencies that have no idea what really what they're looking at in a candidate. So they'll get some very basic ideas of what flight times are. And to be honest with all of you gentlemen and ladies out there making the transition, you're your own worst enemy with your resumes. You get resumes that have no standard convention, that don't have flying hours on them, that don't have proper terminology on them, or they have all the really angry words on them, right? Attack, combat. Keep that stuff out of your resume. It scares the civilian HR representatives, and there's so many more of them out there these days than there used to be. So please also remember that your recruiting staff are human. And for everyone, I had a job that I posted probably 2 weeks ago, and I had over 150 applicants for an obscure location in the middle of the United States. Sometimes if you don't do your diligence and you don't structure or put the right information in the resume, it's going to go right into the loud fax machine. You're not going to hear back. So set yourself up for success by reading Stacy's blog, for example, and following all those tips.
I know we're all bursting out of our skins about resumes right now. We do resume reviews every year at the Heli Expo for Mil2Civ transition. We'll in person, we review your resume. All of these people on this panel will probably happily review your resumes. I just made them very busy during COVID for you. So all of these people will help you with your resumes. First off, though, do everyone a favor and get your resume onto one page. One page is all you need in aviation for maintenance technicians as well. You're a one pager. Just remember, if he got 150 resumes, the average time someone is going to spend at looking at it is 4 to 6 seconds. If they get 5 seconds, it's a miracle. The most of everything they want to see is in the top third of that resume. That resume better look great. Yes, I have an article on LinkedIn. It has free templates included in the article that I wrote for the military, and I also have maintenance technician resume templates there as well. They're free. Feel free, fill it in. It has basically everything you need in the format that employers want to see. The other thing is, did you shotgun that resume? Do you know anyone at that company? Did you reach out to a person, a live person that works there, and even have them critique your resume first before you ever sent it in? Have someone look at it, give you honest to goodness feedback. Have a thick skin, tell them to get out the red pen if they want to. Get your resume set up, get it critiqued several times before you send it by many people, and then send it and let someone know it's actually coming. So definitely you need to find a technician, a pilot, an HR person at that company, and they need to know it's coming. Otherwise, yours is just in the pile with everyone else's. I know you have a lot to say, so go on the rest.
I don't have a lot to say. I think that you pretty much nailed on the head, but I would just like to summarize that if you're a highly qualified candidate for this position and you're not getting feedback, likely the problem is your resume format. So reach out to Stacy's LinkedIn profile for resume format shaping. And also we've got a G pilot right here, Joe. He's used to looking at these resumes. Understand what it is about your resume that's not getting you that interview. And don't be afraid to follow up.
If you apply with me, honestly, I make as much time as I can. When I see somebody that gives me a resume with military experience and you're not qualified for my company, I will reach out to you because I care. And I'm going to tell you, hey, if this is unsolicited advice, great. But if you want to take some time, here's my number, here's my email address. Let's go over your resume and let's talk about avenues where you can go get the experience you need and come back and reapply.
Dave, yes, sir. Go ahead. I think you're on mute.
There we go.
Okay.
Got all flustered with the mute. In the utility side, what I've been noticing lately is I'm seeing a lot of jobs getting posted for utility work on JS Firm on Rotorcraft Pro. Now, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that was never the case. When they advertised a job, it was a text message to a whole bunch of pilots saying, hey, is anyone looking for a job? Do you know anyone looking for a job? I'm sure they're still doing it that way, but they're not filling the slots. So you're looking at these positions on these websites, and when you apply, for most of the utility companies, I'd say it's a bit smaller as far as, yes, there's an HR department, but they do not handle hiring of the pilots. That is directly with the chief pilot or the assistant chief pilot that'll look at these resumes, do the initial phone call interview, and then fly you out for a meeting.
I have one little piece. A lot of people send in a resume and it looks like you've never read the job ad. Your terminology in your resume doesn't match anything in the job advertisement. It's as if you didn't read it. So what you want to do is you want to write those resumes, and you want to use the job ads to help write your resume. Use the terminology in the job ad and insert it wherever it applies inside that resume so that it matches. If it's a computerized system or if it's a human being, they want you need to speak their language. So this is the other part of networking, where you connect, you learn the new language that in the new world that you're eventually coming to, because I'll tell you what, everyone leaves the military. Whether you're retiring or whether you're getting out, you're going to need to learn the new system. It may look chaotic out here, and yes, sometimes it is, but there is a system to it. And the more people you have to guide you, the easier it's going to be. And definitely reach out.
So I've got an interesting question here, and Joan, you may be able to answer this one. Jared Grant asked, he was focusing his time between fixed wing and rotor wing flying. I was wondering if he needs to choose one, or will employers look at that and say, hey, no matter what, I like what you have and what you've done?
That's a really good question. And again, it kind of depends on the provider that you're going to. Air medical is in kind of a state of flux right now. There's legislation that's going on. There's a lot of scrutiny on the industry, much of which has been alleviated through a lot of the regulations and best practices that have been put into place over about the past decade. But just generally speaking, if you're looking at the more major providers, not the one-off hospitals that have airplanes and helicopters, you got to make a decision. And that goes really across all disciplines in rotorcraft. What we see a lot in all of our realms is you're a helicopter pilot and you love to fly, and I'll fly a bathtub with wooden rotor blades. I don't care where I go and I don't care what I do. Well, that's really not what the employer wants to hear. The employer wants to hear, I want to work for your company. Your culture fits me, and this is why. Your mission set fits me, and this is why. So if you got a lot of cross-disciplinary experience, you're a fixed wing guy or fixed wing pilot with 2,000 hours and you got 1,500 rotor, make a choice, because it's going to be so much better for you if you pinpoint exactly what job at what provider that you want to do. Be aware, especially the regular officers or the aviators that come from the Navy or the Air Force. The generalized resumes that talk a lot about all the leadership positions that you held, but very little about the piloting command time, those are the resumes that scare these employers off. Bill yourself as a pilot if you want to be a pilot, and choose a discipline.
Just adding that, Joe, like the resumes, don't underestimate, like when you're doing your bullet points of your job description, the importance of a thorough pre-flight and post-flight inspection. Some of the little things that you do on a day-to-day basis, make sure you emphasize that on your resume.
So another question came in, and this I'll probably address to all the panelists, is the big question: money. What's the average salary out there in all the disciplines that a person can fly in? I'll start with Mark.
Well, I mean, it averages from 60,000 a year up to 150,000 or whatever. It depends on what the job is, what the location, what they're flying, and all that stuff. And something I always talk about in the class is that you're going to have to get used to a money cut, because you're going to probably, if you're retiring or getting out of the service, you're relatively a senior, W3 or better, or an RLO, as Joe used earlier. I appreciate that. So I talk about it. I did I was a W4 in DC, and there was a old website where you can do the conversion to tell you what you would have to do. So I was making, I think with flight pay and housing allowance, all that, I was taking home about 109,000 a year. That was take home. So for me to have a take home of 109,000 a year, I would have to get a job making $165,000 a year right out the gate, just to break even. And that was if I wanted to stay in DC, all that stuff. And each place is different, each town is different, but you got to look initially for, there's going to be some sort of pay cut. If you have retirement coming in and there's a juggle around there, but money will come in later. You just got to, have some humility and be planned for it. I mean, just, make sure the family's planned, talk to your money manager or whatever, or, hit the old Dave Ramsey budgeting thing, whatever it is, just know there's going to be a pay cut. And then, but it'll get better from there, but you're just going to have to, beans and rice for a couple years, and then it'll get better.
Be prepared for sticker shock. And I was in a similar boat. Mark, you were retiring with 26 years of service. I was getting out as an 11-year senior W3. I took a 50% pay cut getting out of the military. And that's not just compensation, that was pay. Starting in EMS was in the mid 50s when I got out of the military in 2014. Luckily, a lot of the industries and the standards have begun to get raised, and the pay scales have been more commensurate with reality or with your skill set as a rotor pilot at the level that everybody transitioning here is. But be aware, you're not on TRICARE anymore unless you're a retiree. Healthcare is expensive out here, and healthcare plans differ across your different companies. So they can vary wildly. When I moved from one company to another in the civilian world, there was a $20,000 difference in the overall compensation outside of base pay, and it was all based on the benefits packages. So be aware for those differences and nuances, and understand your value. You guys and gals were door kicking, just bad A people when you were in the military, but when you come out here, you got to start over, and you really may only have 1, 2, or 3 tiers of pay commensurate with your experience. So just be prepared for that.
I didn't have that same experience. I didn't take a huge loss. Of course, I was a W-2 when I got out, but I didn't take a huge loss. I did, there's a lot to learn. So when you leave a place and you're of high rank or a lot of experience or so on, you may be making a certain amount of money, but you're also not paying for health care or dental care or vision or all of these things. You have to account for that. So that does come right out of your salary. I didn't take a huge pay cut. I was getting texts during this by other people watching it live. They didn't either. So it doesn't have to be that way. And it's not, and if you're in aviation, I hope you have a passion for it, because that's why most of us are still here. We're not in it for the money. But I also know people making $300,000 a year in salary and getting amazing bonuses. So there are those jobs out there, and you can certainly seek them out. I know locationally, geographically, depending on where you are, you may make more money due to the cost of living. In the Northeast, typically the salaries are a little bit higher than some other regions just because of the cost of living. So these are all things that you'll take into account. Where do you want to go? What kind of equipment do you want to fly? What mission do you want to fly? There's a lot of things to take into consideration. So there's a lot out here. I think there's more than most people realize. So the salary is one thing, but there's also a lot of other considerations about jobs on the outside, and the flying's fun. So,
and that's a really good point too, Stacy. You're right. I have a bunch of friends that didn't take pay cuts either, but the disciplines make a big difference. And so coming from an air ambulance standpoint, there's tangible benefits and intangible benefits. You have your pay, you have your benefits, but there's also lifestyle. And a lot of people choose air ambulance for that half work, half home lifestyle balance. There's a lot of people that love to work at my company, for example, because I offer 14 days on and 14 days off, similar to some of the utility contracts out there. People love that 14-day off week where they can go and do whatever they want. I don't call them. I don't care what they're doing. They come back for their 14. Life is good. So consider the lifestyle for the place where you're looking as well.
Just real quick, we're a little bit past 7. I just want to make sure everybody's okay to continue for a little bit longer, unless you have something that you need to do. We're all good for a few minutes more? Great, thanks. Go ahead, Heidi.
I just was looking at the clock and noticing that we're kind of getting a little bit long on time. And before we lose our listeners, yes, the numbers are definitely there. And I would like to, like Mark said, and Stacey, you guys are mentioning some numbers. In the Gulf of Mexico, if you're just starting out and you're at the 1,000-hour mark, you can look at about maybe 62. If you've got, say, 1,500 hours, you can expect around 75. If you can accept a 5 and 2 position, sometimes you can make up to the 100,000 plus range. In utility, I think starting out, what's a starting out salary in utility, like in MD500, say 1,200 hours, Dave?
It varies. Sometimes the starting salaries can be really low, like you're going to get that sticker shock. But think of it, if you get offered that job, you're going to be the lowest paid pilot in that company, but they are going to give you training. So think how much a long line course costs. You're going to get thousands of dollars worth of training, and you're going to get paid for that. Once you get good at what you do, I don't know any pilot that's a turnkey pilot. We call them turnkeys, meaning you could go to another company and you don't need training. They check you out and you're safe to go under their procedures. A turnkey pilot in the utility is generally not making under $150,000 a year, working an even schedule. I know guys that just like to work. I have a friend that made a lot of money last year. He made 440,000, and I was pretty impressed with that. But last year I did pretty well, but I only worked about 4 months. So the utility, your schedule, I always say it's 21 and 21 supposedly. So you're usually at work for 21 days and then you go home, but you may be at work for 21 days and the job's only got 3 or 4 days left. There's no point bringing out another pilot to learn the job and complete the job. If you're there, just get it completed, unless you have to get home for something. You may be home for a couple of days. Sorry?
Your inbox is full now.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I did not make 440. That was a friend of mine that made the 440. A really good friend of mine now. He just went up a level after he told me that.
I'm talking hard numbers in air ambulance just to cover that so that you get that example as well. Starting pay at almost across the board, industry standard is mid-60s to low 70s starting pay, commensurate with experience. Some places you can get into the 80s. As you start talking VFR versus IFR or single versus twin, that's when your pay starts to go up. So if you're brought in as a single engine VFR pilot, entry level, minimal experience, mid-60s, low 70s. Full experience, maybe fresh out of the military or not, twin engine IFR, you may be getting into the low 80s. And if you find yourself one of these Cadillac jobs at a hospital-based program that has like Memorial Hermann or a Vera McKinnon Care Flight, these places you'll be looking at 90s to low 100s. After 6 years with one of the larger corporations, myself as a line pilot, safety officer, stipends, all of these, working a 7 on, 7 off schedule with 1 week of overtime every month all year, I was pulling in $125,000 a year. So it's there to be had.
Yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Just before we lose our listeners, could we maybe ask Mr. Adam Lawrence about his company, and is he potentially looking for candidates, and what the flight hour requirements he might be looking for at his company, and the kind of job mission that his company does?
Hi, and can everyone hear me there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm the chief pilot for Air Center Helicopters. Our owner just loves military pilots. I was a former Army pilot myself. And we have such a diverse mission set that we're doing. We do a lot with the Department of Defense. We do stuff domestically into the utility world. Like Stacy and Mark said, though, sending out these resumes is great. So send them to your friends, have them double check and send it on to us here at Air Center. But do that networking. It's huge. The whole 6 degrees of separation. Everyone knows everyone. And working your way over into the utility world takes an investment. So if we know someone's good, we'll put that money into them, and then you work your way up that pay scale, and you get into those specialized jobs like Dave was talking about. And Joe, you know as well as anyone, there's so many resumes that come across. Please just reach out, get to know people in the industry. So check out Air Center, just air.center, based here at DFW, and look forward to hearing from everyone.
Thank
And
you.
what
Adam.
is your name so people can search you?
Adam Lawrence.
Your inbox is full, Adam.
Yeah, good.
Adam, is there any way you could take just a couple of minutes to kind of itemize the types of flight hour requirements you're looking for the candidates who may be sending their resumes, just to make sure that they qualify before they fill that inbox?
Sure, they're basically the same as Joe was saying there. So we're looking for a 1,500 minimum. We know most people coming out of the military have the multi-engine time. They have generally the basic requirements that you need. So if you hit those minimums, just reach out. We're looking for just good people, because our contracts, we do a lot of international work, and you're living with that person that you're working with. So having a good community out there on some of these tough conditions that we're in makes a world of difference, as everyone knows out there.
Thanks for that, Adam. Appreciate that. And we've come up on a time where we got to call it a halt to this, but I want to ask each of the panelists on one last tidbit. If you had to give one point to the folks out there, what would that be? And just ask each of the panelists to kind of answer that question. Starting with Stacy.
Get myself unmuted here. Connect early. Tell people your interests, ask for advice, follow some of that advice, seek out opportunity as much as you can, and actively pursue opportunity. These things aren't just going to fall into your lap. You can't just, get in your bunny slippers and your jammies and shoot out 200 resumes and expect for answers to come in. You're going to need a network. You're going to need people and mentors and guides. So, and keep a logbook. That's another one.
Heidi, to you.
I definitely second what Stacy said. The other thing, whenever I think is really important when it comes to the networking industry, understand what networking is. It's be exactly who you are, be yourself, just as we heard from Mr. Lawrence about they're looking for good people. Like, there's a lot of people that qualify with a resume and the numbers, but then that gets you the interview. And when they interview, you need to be a good fit for them, and they need to be a good fit for you. Decide what you want to do in this industry and feel like, oh my goodness, I would love to do DoD. I definitely want to be an international pilot. I've been waiting this opportunity to fly internationally for a really long time, and I get along with people. Make sure you're genuine, make sure you're sincere, make sure you research the company, understand their core values, understand who the leadership of that company is. So when you get that interview, you're familiar with them and you understand and familiar with that mission of the company. I just brain farted, but yeah, just make sure that you're very genuine and you are sincere whenever you are making those interview opportunities and you're networking.
Thank you. And go to Mark.
The big thing for me would be to trust your gut. I talk about in the course about a lot of examples of people who just trust their gut. I mean, it's be it the little voice or whatever it is that's telling you if something feels right or not. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Quick story: I had an opportunity to be the chief pilot for Robert Kraft, who was the Patriots, if you know who that is. Everything sounded awesome. Get to fly Tom Brady around his wife, and all this stuff is really exciting. But it took me a while to figure out that I was selling my soul. I had to be on call 24/7 to go wherever you wanted. I could be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time. Then I realized, when I started listening into my gut and stuff like that, and then bouncing it off people that I trusted in my network, I knew that wasn't the job for me. So trust your gut. And also, I have a bunch of articles on transition on my LinkedIn as well. I highly encourage you to read those as well.
Thanks, Mark. Joe, I'll go to you, sir.
Thank you, Greg. I guess the biggest thing that I could say that hasn't already been spoken about is to know ahead of time what you want. It's really important before you start throwing resumes to the world, because a lot of these resumes, they stick out there for a long time, and all of the pilot hiring recruiters talk to each other. Everybody pretty much knows everybody. So make a decision, know that it's right for you and your family. Be prepared and do the work that Heidi talked about, the research on the company that you want to work for. Know why you want to work there. And above all else, don't do what Mark said. Mark did the perfect thing. Don't sell your soul for a job that sounds great. If it's not a fit for you, don't pursue it. Above all else, the money can be great. The airframe can be great. Everybody in the industry is chasing one of three things: an airframe, qualification, money, or they're trying to get back home. Decide what you want to do, but don't compromise your values and don't compromise who you are as a person and what's a good fit for you, because the recruiter is going to see right through it. And you really don't want to waste your time or their time. So ensure that it's a fit for you and prepare. Always be prepared.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. David, over to you.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Always have a plan B. No one's going to go jumping out an airplane without a reserve. Even if it looks golden and you're in, make sure you've got a plan B, so that you're not disappointed. And like Heidi, she took her plan A, and her plan B turned into her plan A 10 months later. So make sure you got a plan B.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you for your participation today. I really appreciate it. Great insights from each of you on the transition process. And to the members out there, if you're thinking about it, have additional questions, please download the contact list from the webinar here. You can get them, or contact us here at HAI. And we're more than happy to put you in contact with any of these panelists, and they can talk to you more. And my number is always there. It's open. Contact me. You can talk to me at any point in time. And because I've been there, I've been through it, so I know what you're going through. Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate it. And I turn it over to Dan.
Okay, Greg, thank you so much. Stacy, Heidi, Joe, Mark, and Dave, that was fantastic. I know that we have questions that we just simply did not get to. I will invite you to go ahead and turn your cameras off. We greatly appreciate not only your time, we appreciate your service to your respective countries, and we are grateful that you're so willing to share your information with people who are making the transition now or in the future. As Greg mentioned, there is a contact list in the handout tab for those of you who are watching this live. It does have the email or the LinkedIn contacts for each of the panelists. It also has Greg Brown's email address. Feel free to reach out. I did not think to put his phone number in, but that's available on our website, I believe. For those of you who are watching this on video, don't despair. The handout information will be connected on our website, rotor.org/webinars. If you go to the right column, you'll find the archive for all of our past webinars going into last year. And there will be a separate attachment for this particular video. So don't feel like you're going to lose out if you're watching this later. Again, we do have lots of questions that didn't get answered. One of the things we're going to try and do possibly is create a Q&A document that we might also attach. If you feel like you didn't get a chance to get your question answered, we'll try and get that up next week. It probably will not be up as quickly as the video and the handout with the contact information, but we will try to get that added by the end of the week. Got a few things we'd like to talk about as well. We brought this up last week, and I thought it was important that we bring it up again. The 56 Seconds to Live video that the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team just put out. It's a fantastic video for training for IMC flight conditions and getting in there accidentally, what to do. It's going to be part of a larger educational program that will be debuting a little later this spring. Do try to come back to the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team website or the HAI website under the Safety tab and look for those tools. Coming up next week, we have Finding Success, again, careers in rotorcraft maintenance. This is for the wrench turners. We know that we've done a couple of these for pilots. We did one for maintenance techs last summer, and so it's overdue again. We have some great companies for this one. We have Aero Brigham, a completion company in Decatur, Texas. Columbia Helicopters. They are a worldwide company that uses maintenance people both in their shops, their facilities, and of course around the world. And we have MD Helicopters who will be participating to talk about what it takes to work for a manufacturer for helicopters. I think it's going to be a great webinar. If you have a chance to pass the information along to other mechanics, they're welcome, obviously, to watch it live. We will be sending out links in e-blasts on Rotor Daily and in social media. And of course, it'll also be available on video after the fact. Coming up next, we do have a questionnaire that will come to each of you. We do ask, especially since we don't do very many of these Mil2Civ webinars, we would like to do more of them. What did you like about this one? What can we do different? What would you like to see in the future? Please let us know. Please take the time. Are there other topics you'd like us to include? We're happy to try to work with these topics. We've been doing these for almost a year, and so we're always looking for new topics. Please share your thoughts with us. It won't take too long. If you have thoughts about things that are not related to the webinar, about what HAI could help do for the industry, help do for you, if we're doing something right, if we're doing something wrong, if we could do something better, please let us know that as well. The easiest way to do that, as always, is through the email address president@rotor.org. That goes directly to Jim Viola. He does share those emails with the staff members where it's appropriate, and we do try to act on them as quickly as we possibly can. Okay, the webinar is over. I'm going to leave the webinar up for just a little while longer in case you didn't get a chance to get into the handouts tab on the side of your control panel to download that contact sheet. But I probably will want to leave it open for about another minute or so. And I'll try and give you a little bit of warning. We do thank you for your time. We ask that you be safe, that you fly safe, and we'll see you next week.